From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
We believe that in 6 months we'll be in the same position. And the only thing that we are sure is that the Greek society is poorer and the Greek political system is bankrupt.
Greece erupts in protests against a new austerity package. Under the deal, Greece will fire 1 in 5 public sector employees, reducing the minimum wage by 22% and cutting pension plans even further. We'll speak with the nation's Maria Margaronis. Then a Valentine's Day treat. All there is. Love stories from StoryCorps.
You have the Valentine's Day letter there.
Yeah. My dearest wife, this is a very special day. It is a day on which we share our love, which still grows after all these years. Now that love is being used by us to sustain us through these hard times. All my love, all my days, and more. Happy Valentine's Day.
We'll speak with StoryCorps founder Dave Isay.
It is, as a sacred bond with participants and a very important experience in their lives. There are just some that have this kind of universal quality and this kind of poetry that make them appropriate to share with a larger audience.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israeli officials are blaming Iran after Israeli diplomats were targeted in nearly simultaneous bombings in India and the former Soviet state of Georgia. 4 people were injured in India, including the wife of the Israeli embassy's defense attaché. The bomb in Georgia was disarmed after it was discovered on a vehicle parked at the Israeli embassy. Iran denied responsibility for Monday's bombing, saying the Israeli accusations were part of a psychological war against it. Meanwhile, authorities in Thailand say an Iranian man carrying explosives blew off his own legs and wounded 4 other people in 2 blasts earlier today in Bangkok. Iran has accused Israel of being behind the recent assassinations of 5 Iranian nuclear scientists inside Iran. Last week, NBC reported the Israeli Secret Service has provided money, training, and weapons to an Iranian dissident group that's thought to be responsible for the killings of the scientists. An Iranian official said Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, trained the group on the use of motorcycles to attach small magnetic bombs to cars, as well as building a replica of an Iranian scientist's home for the group to use in training. The Iranian group, called the People's Mujahideen of Iran, may also have been involved in a November explosion near Tehran that destroyed a missile facility and killed more than a dozen researchers. Syrian government forces have reportedly attacked opponents of President Bashar al-Assad on several fronts, sending residents fleeing from one town near the capital and bombarding the city of Homs for an 11th day running. Citizens of Homs are facing a humanitarian crisis. Food and fuel are scarce, and most shops are shut due to relentless shelling and rocket fire. At the United Nations UN Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, said Assad has been emboldened by what she described as the Security Council's failure to agree on collective action.
I am particularly appalled by the ongoing onslaught on Homs. Since 3rd February, in further escalation of its assault, the government has used tanks, mortars, rockets, and artillery to pummel the city of Homs. According to credible accounts, the Syrian army has shelled densely populated neighborhoods of Homs in what appears to be an indiscriminate attack on civilian areas.
Security forces in Bahrain have fired tear gas today in an attempt to prevent demonstrators from gathering in the Pearl Roundabout to mark the first anniversary of the start of pro-democracy protests in Bahrain. In related news, the hacking group Anonymous claims to have shut down the websites of the Bahraini government as well as the U.S.-based tear gas manufacturer Combined Systems, which has sold tear gas to the Bahraini and Egyptian governments. Bahrain is a close U.S. ally, the home of the Navy's Fifth Fleet. President Obama called on Monday for aggressive spending to boost growth and for higher taxes on the rich. While outlining his $3.8 trillion budget, Obama said he wants wealthier Americans to bear more of the burden of slashing a federal deficit.
We don't need to be providing additional tax cuts for folks who are doing really well. Do we want to keep these tax cuts for wealthiest Americans, or do we want to keep investing in everything else? Education, clean energy, a strong military, care for our veterans. We can't do both. We can't afford it. Some people go around, they say, well, the president's engaging in class warfare. That's not class warfare. That's common sense.
Republican Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama criticized Obama's budget plan.
Under the pronouncements that we're hearing from the White House, this budget reduces our deficit by $4 trillion. That is absolutely untrue. It doesn't reduce the deficit at all, virtually.
In campaign news, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum has overtaken Mitt Romney in a pair of national polls for the first time. Meanwhile, the National Review, a prominent conservative publication, has called for Newt Gingrich to quit the race and endorse Santorum. 2 states have taken steps toward legalizing same-sex marriage. The New Jersey State Senate voted in favor of a same-sex marriage bill on Monday. The bill is expected to reach the New Jersey Assembly Thursday, but Governor Chris Christie has vowed to veto it. Meanwhile, Washington has become the 7th state to legalize same-sex marriage after Governor Chris Gregoire signed a measure into law on Monday. Opponents there have filed a referendum challenging the law. If opponents collect the more than 120,000 signatures required before June 6th, the law would be put on hold pending a November vote. Senate Republicans are trying again to revive the proposed Keystone XL tar sands oil pipeline. On Monday, Senate Republicans introduced an amendment to a federal transportation bill that would speed the construction and operation of the controversial pipeline. In response, over 600,000 people signed an online petition in a matter of hours on Monday opposing the pipeline. The move comes as Republican leaders in the House face criticism for their version of a transportation bill. The House bill would allow oil and gas drilling in U.S. coastal waters and eliminate a decades-long agreement guaranteeing mass transit a 1/5 share of fuel taxes and other fees. In an interview with Politico earlier this month, Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood called the House measure, quote, the worst transportation bill he had seen in decades, while the New York Times editorial board called the bill, quote, uniquely terrible. iPhone and computer manufacturer Apple has announced officials from the Fair Labor Association have begun monitoring its suppliers' factories in China following a string of reports about labor abuses. The labor rights inspectors began their investigation Monday in the Chinese city of Shenzhen, home of a massive Foxconn factory. The Fair Labor Association has been criticized by some labor activists for its close ties to corporate America. The association is funded by 34 companies, including Nike and Liz Claiborne. China's Vice President Xi Jinping is scheduled to meet with President Obama in Washington today. His visit comes at a time when the Obama administration is stepping up military ties to several of China's neighbors, including the Philippines and Vietnam. On Monday, members of Students for a Free Tibet rallied in Washington.
I want to send a message to President Obama that he should put the strongest pressure he can on Xi Jinping and seize this opportunity to urge the Chinese leadership to stop the atrocities in Tibet right now.
Meanwhile, another Tibetan Buddhist monk has set himself on fire to protest China's rule over Tibet. At least 20 Tibetans have set fire to themselves over the past year. A study has found most New York medical centers are violating rules meant to help patients who cannot afford health care. The state's indigent care pool, which is funded partly by a surcharge on hospital bills, distributes more than $1 billion each year to help patients without insurance pay for medical care. But a study by the Community Service Society found 2/3 of hospitals whose aid applications were studied either violate the law, fail to comply with state guidance, or create additional barriers to assistance. This despite receiving a combined total of more than $463 million for the program in 2010. Some hospitals did not even provide financial aid applications. The New York Times detailed the story of one uninsured patient who was sued by the hospital after she amassed $88,000 in hospital bills. That hospital had received more than $50 million that year to help care for uninsured patients. Secret New York police documents have revealed a confidential New York police informant spied on Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network as the group was meeting to discuss protests against the police killing of Sean Bell. The informant attended a meeting held by the group in 2008 after 3 detectives were acquitted of killing Bell, who died on the morning of his wedding in 2006 after police fired 50 shots. A police document shows the informant gave police a description of protest plans and the names of people involved. A pair of Occupy Wall Street protesters have sued New York Police Deputy Inspector Anthony Bologna for pepper spraying them in the face during a protest in September in Manhattan. The lawsuit states Anthony Bologna maced the plaintiffs as they were exercising their constitutionally protected rights, including freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. The 2 protesters, Chelsea Elliott and Jean Mansfield, were captured on videotape being pepper sprayed while surrounded by police netting. In other Occupy news, 3 protesters were arrested in Tacoma, Washington Monday night as they disrupted a campaign rally by Rick Santorum. The Republican presidential candidate responded by describing Occupy protesters as a, quote, radical element that represents, quote, true intolerance. In environmental news, 16 Greenpeace activists were arrested Monday for protesting at a coal plant in Asheville, North Carolina. The protesters latched themselves to equipment and even scaled a 400-foot smokestack. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.